Shut them down. 5 minutes remaining. 2 for 1. 2 for 1. Double down. Triple down.
Ladies and gents, my name is Xander, aka Diaslayers, and in this video, we're going to discuss all the brand spanking new Vex Offensive / Vex Invasion weapons, and in particular, their PvP god rolls that you guys should be looking for all 4 of these new weapons. Now you might be asking yourself, okay, well, what are these 4 weapons? To you, my friends, I say, that is a spectacular question, as this includes the Imperative Scout Rifle, the Adhortative Pulse Rifle, the Optative Hand Cannon, and the Subjunctive SMG, which, might I add, all have some incredibly cool rolls that might just give you the upper hand in PvP. Before we can get into that, you all have to understand how you guys can get your hands on these beauties, and the way in which you do so is by completing the Vex Offensive questline via Ikora. You'll then have access to get one of these 4 weapons, and you can do so on a regular basis by farming them, either by completing the Vex Invasions and thus gaining an RNG drop, or by going to Ikora and picking up one of the bounties to obtain one of these 4 weapons that's then going to give you either the SMG, the hand cannon, the scout rifle, or the pulse rifle. With just a teeny tiny bit of grinding, you might happen to get that god roll that you guys are looking for one of these 4 monsters. And now you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, well, what exactly is the god roll that I'm looking for? To find this out, my friends, the only thing left to do is to simply sit back, relax, grab some popcorn, and eviscerate that notification button, and let's jump right into the video. Up to the plate first is a somewhat unique and actually quite interesting scout rifle, which I believe might be able to 2-tap given a couple of certain conditions. I'm not sure because I haven't tested it out myself, but nonetheless, that scout rifle is called the Imperative. Now before I can even get into that roll that just might 2-tap Guardians, gosh, even saying that out loud is mind-boggling, what we have to understand first is this weapon's base stats. And the reason why I want you to do so is because this is then going to tell us the weapon's strengths and its weaknesses, and thus we're then going to be able to know as to exactly what kind of perks that we should be looking for to have this perfect symbiotic relationship with the weapon itself. As you guys can see from right here, this thing has a rate of fire of 150 rounds per minute, with a phenomenal range stat at 69 out of 100, a despicable stability stat at 28, and a horrible handling stat at 30, followed by just a mediocre reload speed at 37. Yet on top of all this stuff is a very good recoil direction at 88, and following this is a pretty garbage aim assistance at 33. Lastly, we have a brand new stat here, and that's called bounce intensity. And the reason why there's an R by it is because this then dictates as to approximately which direction that the weapon's going to go, in which I believe when you're getting shot at. Of course, this then entails that the weapon's going to be aiming down sights, and with that quote-unquote bounce or rather flinch that you're going to see from the weapon, this is what I perceive to be bounce intensity. And with that, we then know that's going to be towards the right, and it's also going to have 20 out of 100. In taking into account all these things, what we're then looking for is to have this weapon either increase its range stat exponentially so then we can get more bullet magnetism, or we're really trying to focus on 2 other stats, aka stability and handling, so then this thing can be that much more precise and it can be more accurate, all while simultaneously incorporating an even higher recoil direction so that we can get that perfectly vertical up and down movement 24/7. In hearing this, we can then understand all the weapons perks that it has, and the ones that I recommend are the perks that you guys see right there. Now I know that there's a lot, so let me just cover that first and second column first, and then we'll get into the next columns after that. In the first column, we happen to have arrowhead break, chamber compensator, corkscrew rifling, fluted barrel, polygon rifling, and small bore, with that second column following this to be drop mag, steady rounds, and flared magwell. With these 2 columns of perks, the main thing that we're looking for is we're simply trying to increase the weapon's overall recoil direction, or we're trying to increase the weapon's overall stability, so then that way it can land more consecutive critical headshots and thus obtain the weapon's optimal TTK that much more frequently. In association with this, we then have that second column of perks, and the whole function of this column is to pretty much just simply increase the weapon's reload speed, as that is very poor. And depending on the other perks that we get, we might want to have that very fast reload speed. Grasping this, we can then get into that third and fourth column, and pretty much, my friends, you simply can't go wrong with almost any one of these perks in these 2 columns, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to list all of them. And the first one in the third column is No Distractions, followed by Triple Tap, Eye of the Storm, Subsistence, and Outlaw. And then finally that fourth column with Explosive Payload, Rampage, Multi-Kill Clip, Rangefinder, Snapshot Sights, and Opening Shot. Depending on the way in which you play, either aggressive, passive, or somewhere in between, that's then going to really dictate as to how this weapon is going to function the best. But if you were to ask me, I would highly recommend that you try and get some no flinch perks or some accuracy perks in that second column, and then following that, the third column, well, you know me, I want to have the highest lethality possible or either the most consistency possible. And so taking into account all these things, this then boils down into one specific role that I think that you guys should certainly look for. That role is the one that you guys see right there on screen, and it's got Arrowhead Break, Drop Mag, No Distractions or Eye of the Storm, and of course, Multi-Kill Clip. With Arrowhead Break, this weapon's overall recoil direction is going to be at 100 out of 100, and that's then going to allow you to land more critical headshots. But then when you couple this with say Multi-Kill Clip and Drop Mag's then going to give you that incredibly fast reload speed to then proc Multi-Kill Clip that much faster, and depending on how many kills that you get, I haven't quite done the math yet, but you might just be able to get a 2-tap if you happen to get 2, potentially 3 kills and then reload, and then bada bing bada boom, that Guardian is going to say adios, bye-bye, thank you, come again. In addition to this, I would then also recommend either No Distractions or Eye of the Storm, and depending on your playstyle once again, it's really then just going to dictate as to how you want to have one of these two perks, because one's going to give more accuracy as your health gets lower, and that's more for an aggressive playstyle. Then you might also want to use No Distractions, and that's then going to come in play for a more passive playstyle, as all you have to simply do is just aim down sights for 1.5 seconds, and then you get almost no flinch and on a scout rifle. That can make a world of difference and maybe make this thing just the best scout rifle in the game. Will it actually be the best scout? Some might say yes, and some might say no, and really it's just going to depend on you. But nonetheless, we have to move on to our next weapon, and in this case, it's the pulse rifle called the adhortative. Not gonna lie, Diaslayers, that name right there is extremely difficult to say, and I'm probably butchering it into the ground, and I really don't know why Bungie does this to us, but even so, you have to understand this weapon's base stats first, and that's then going to allow us to then know as to what kind of perks that we should be looking for to complement all these deficits and strengths. As you guys can see from right there, this thing has a rate of fire at 390 rounds per minute, and following this, it's got a mediocre range stat at 47, a pretty darn good stability stat at 55, a moderate handling and reload speed at 48 and 45 respectively, followed by a pretty darn good aim assistance at 61, and a really good recoil direction at 61 as well. Lastly, we had that bounce intensity, and that's then going to go towards the right hand side, and it's at 39 out of 100, which then means to me that this thing's going to jump quite a bit. And so taking into account all these things, what we're really looking for here is number 1, perks that are going to increase this weapon's overall effective range. And that's because this thing right here, along with all other pulse rifles in the game, got a massive nerf in terms of the overall effectiveness. But ensuing this, you might also want to consider something that's going to increase the weapon's stability or maybe even bounce intensity, aka perks that are going to make the weapon more consistent and more reliable. With this knowledge, I can show you guys all the perks that I would recommend on this pulse rifle, and right there on screen you can see all of them. And I know that there's a lot to take in, so once again I'm just going to cover that first and second column. And those perks in the first column are Arrowhead Break, Chamber Compensator, Corkscrew Rifling, Extended Barrel, Full Bore, Hammer Forged Rifling, and Small Bore, followed by the second column, which is then Armor Piercing Rounds, High Caliber Rounds, and Ricochet Rounds. Essentially what we're trying to do here is achieve one of two things. And the first one is to increase the weapon's overall recoil direction, because if that goes up, then we're going to land more critical headshots as the weapon's going to become more consistent. But number 2 is increase the weapon's overall effective range, because as you know, this weapon's overall effective range and all pulse rifles' effective range got nerfed to smithereens, and so thus we're trying to compensate for this. But simultaneously, we're also trying to increase the weapon's overall bullet magnetism, making it so that bullets might actually hit targets even though they might appear to you that they're actually missing. In comprehending that, what I want to do now is I want to move on to that third and fourth column of perks. In the third column, we happen to have Feeding Frenzy, followed by Field Prep and Underdog. And last but not least, we have that fourth column of perks, which is going to have Rampage, Multi-Kill Clip, and Rangefinder. In other words, What we're pretty much trying to do here is we're trying to create perks that are going to have number 1, a very high reload speed to compensate for the weapon's low reload speed, while at the same time give the weapon a high lethality stat or a high consistency stat. And so taking those two things into consideration, we then get a roll that I think is what you should all be looking for, and that roll is right there on screen. This roll pertains to extended barrel, high caliber rounds, feeding frenzy or underdog, and multi-kill clip or rangefinder. With extended barrel and high caliber rounds, these two perks are both going to increase the weapon's overall effective range, and they're going to do so combined by plus 15. But not just this, extended barrel is also going to increase the weapon's overall recoil direction by 10, making more shots land more frequently, and high caliber rounds is also going to add a wonderful advantage of flinch. Now if you want to have a very high lethality roll, then the number one way to go here is with feeding frenzy and multi-kill clip, as those two things combined are going to have some excellent synergy. And just in case you don't happen to get feeding frenzy but you have a very aggressive playstyle, then underdog is certainly going to come into play along with multi-kill clip. But I also know that some of you might want a more consistent roll, and so in this particular case, you might want someone like rangefinder and feeding frenzy, as that's once again going to give you that extra range and thus make the weapon that much more reliable. With this, I think that you guys now have a very solid comprehension or understanding of how this pulse rifle should be used and what you should be looking for. But now we come to the next weapon, and this one just so happens to be the hand cannon, and it's called optative. Once again, we're going to look at the weapon's base stats first, as that's then going to tell us all the weapon's strengths and all of its weaknesses, and then we can know as to exactly what kind of perks that we should be looking for to complement or contradict all of these particular stats. As you guys can see from right here, this thing is in the same rate of fire as the service revolver or the trust at 180 rounds per minute. But not just this, it's got a mediocre but really less than average range stat at only 41, a really good stability stat at 60, a terrible handling stat at 33, a pretty darn good reload speed at 58, and last but not least, the two stats that might be even more important than this, or rather I should say 3 stats that are more important than this, that is the weapon's aim assistance at 67, its recoil direction at 97, and the bounce intensity vertical only at 3, which is just simply mind-boggling and astounding on so many levels that I really can't believe that that's actually what it truly is. What these stats should dictate to you, just the same way that they do to me, is number 1, the weapon's range could certainly be increased, and so we're going to look for perks that are going to do that. But number 2, it's got a very good shot rhythm with the weapon's stability stat, aim assistance, recoil direction, and bounce intensity, all being so high or low in their certain respective fields. That then implies that maybe we could have some wiggle room to potentially get a very high lethality roll while still having a great consistency factor and a great overall shot rhythm. In conceptualizing all that jazz, we can now look at the weapon's perks, and the ones that I would recommend to you is right there on screen. And yet again, I know there's a lot of perks here, so just like from before, we're going to look at that first and second column of perks first, and then we'll get into Leader 2 in just a couple of seconds. Starting everything off is corkscrew rifling, followed by extended barrel, full bore, hammer forged rifling, and small bore, but then concluding the second column of perks is accurate rounds, drop mag, and flared magwell. What we're pretty much trying to achieve here with these two columns of perks is number 1, increase the weapon's overall effective range, and that's because this weapon's range stat is very low, and that then means a low bullet magnetism. So even if the weapon's range isn't hitting quite as well as what it could from before Shadowkeep, this bullet magnetism is still going to be very high, and that's what we're trying to achieve. Moving on then into that third and fourth column of perks, we then happen to have rapid hit, under pressure, outlaw, and underdog, ensued by Zen moment, opening shot, and kill clip. Basically, these two columns of perks are trying to increase the weapon's overall reload speed, increase the weapon's overall stability, thus increasing the weapon's consistency, all while at the same time potentially increasing the weapon's overall lethality, and it really just depends on the perk combinations that you just happen to get. If you were to ask me, there is one specific role that I'm looking for in every single one of these columns, along with a ranged masterwork, and that role is the one that you happen to see right there on screen. It pertains to hammer forged rifling, accurate rounds, rapid hit, and kill clip. And the reason why I want this to be the exact role that you happen to get is because with hammer forged rifling and accurate rounds, those two perks combined are then going to increase the weapon's range by plus 20, and if you happen to get a ranged masterwork, that's going to be a total of plus 30 range. That means that this weapon's bullet magnetism is going to be skyrocketing through the roof, and you're going to hit crit after crit after crit. And the reason why you want this to be the case is because with rapid hits, that perk requires critical headshots to number 1, increase the weapon's overall stability, and number 2, increase the reload speed. With that increase in reload speed, that then means that you're going to proc kill clip and then be able to 3-tap Guardians that much more consistently, getting that 0.67 TTK on a very regular basis. That roll right there is easily going to make enemy Guardians a little bit salty. But even so, I'm very intrigued to hear some other rolls that you guys might be looking for on this particular hand cannon and why that is the case. While you're thinking about that and then writing it down in the comment section below, the next thing that I want to talk about is our final perk, or rather I should say our final weapon, and this weapon is the SMG known as the subjunctive. This subjunctive SMG is very intriguing, and I think that it's going to play very well for an aggressive playstyle. And the reason why this is so is what I'll get into in just a couple of seconds. But before I do so, you have to understand the weapon's base stats, and you guys can see those right there on screen. You might notice that this thing happens to have a rate of fire at 900 rounds per minute, but not just this, the weapon's range stat is still not too shabby for say an SMG at 33 out of 100, but its stability factor is terrible at 43, has a very good ADS speed aka handling at 69, and the weapon's aim assistance is not too shabby at 52, while the weapon's recoil direction is superb at 92 out of 100, ensued by the bounce stability going to the left and is at 8 out of 100. Now I know that SMGs are supposed to be used in those very close engagements, but maybe if you're lucky enough you can get some perks that are then going to increase that range, making it more effective in more environments, but simultaneously what you also really want to focus on here is increasing that weapon's stability stat, because this thing absolutely needs more critical headshots, and stability is certainly going to give that in those closer range engagements. And hearing that, we can then get into the perks that I would recommend for this specific SMG. And right off the bat, we're then going to have corkscrew rifling, extended barrel, full bore, hammer force rifling, and small bore in that first column. But following this is the second column, and that's then armor piercing rounds, high caliber rounds, and ricochet rounds, ensued by the second column to be either outlaw or quick draw, and lastly our final column of perks to be either swashbuckler, multi-kill clip, or rampage. Upon first inspection, you might realize that this thing is then going to require it to use some type of damage buffing perk, and all of those are then going to require at least one kind of kill to get any of them procced, and thus this tells you that you must play very aggressively with this SMG to make it even somewhat effective. Depending on the character that you happen to use the most, Hunter, Warlock, or Titan, and the subclass associated with it, that's then going to dictate some different perks that I really think are going to synergize with that build the best. And so to see this, that perk combination that you see right there on screen is the one roll or rolls in which I would recommend. It's got full bore with ricochet rounds, outlaw or quick draw, and swashbuckler or multi-kill clip. And the reasoning behind this logic is because if you're on a Titan that uses syntheseps, then quick draw and something like swashbuckler is certainly going to be the exact type of combination of perks that you want to use, as you're going to be able to utilize that more effectively. However, if you happen to be a hunter with some little T-Rex arms that nobody wants to use because you all know that their melees are trash, then you might want to use something like say outlaw and multi-kill clip, as that's then going to allow you to have the weapon be more effective and more lethal in a wider variety of engagements. Of course, everything that I've said in this entire video is entirely up to you and to how you play the best, so by all means, please let me know what you guys think about all this stuff down in the comment section below, and whether or not one of these rolls that I've mentioned from either the Pulse, the hand cannon, the scout rifle, or the SMG is exactly what you're looking for, or you might be looking for something entirely different, and if so, that's fantastic, because then I get to try a different playstyle myself. Regardless of how you look at these types of rolls, I just hope that RNG is on your side and that you get the exact roll that you're looking for, so then you can annihilate, decimate, and obliterate every single guardian in your path, making them full of holes, just like some delicious, scrumptious, and oh so tasty Swiss cheese. Lastly, be sure to watch the newest, check the latest, and share, comment, like on social media, because you are the greatest. That's pretty much all I've got for you as of right now, Diaslayers. As always, GG, TNT.